A bit ago, I had a job at a fuel stop close to a big park where lots of animals lived. Every day, I had to drive for an hour each way on a road that was mostly alone and had trees on both sides. Even during daytime, it was kind of dim, and when it was night, it was super dark. To give you a picture, back then I was 23, and I stayed with my big brother Mike and his girlfriend Sarah. I was going to a nearby local college. When it was hot and sunny, I'd work all day, but when I had school, I worked just a little. I didn't have my own car, but Mike had this old truck, a Toyota, and he said I could use it. It ran okay, but there was this thing with the part that cools the engine. It had a leak, and the engine would get too hot when the liquid in it was almost gone. Mike kept saying, "Make sure to check it," but he never really fixed it himself. One summer day, it was Monday, and I was so tired from the weekend, I just slept most of the day. I had to go to work at night, starting at 10 p.m., so I thought I had a lot of time. I kept sleeping and waking up until I heard Sarah and later Mike come in. That's when it hit me. It was close to 8 p.m. I jumped out of bed super quick because I knew I needed to be driving by 8:45 p.m. Soon I was in the truck, driving in the pitch black with only the front lights of the truck showing me the way. It felt even darker that night, and I wasn't expecting to see any other cars given the time. In my hurry, I realized I'd left my phone at home, and I remembered something even worse. I hadn't looked at the engine cooling thing since the end of last week. I started to feel a bad feeling in my stomach, like when you know something is going to go wrong. Right then, a light on my dashboard blinked on. This had never happened before, and almost right away the truck started slowing down. I was so close to work, maybe 20 minutes away, so I tried to push the gas pedal all the way. Then I heard a loud sound from the front, and then the truck just went slower and slower until it stopped by the side. There I was, in the middle of nowhere, surrounded by trees and without my phone. I sat still for a while thinking about what I should do next, but it only felt like a long time. It was probably just a short time. Oh. I remembered the small space in front of the passenger seat. I reached inside and felt something. I pulled out a really small light that wasn't very strong. I had just one choice. I had to walk to my job. I guessed it might take me about 3 hours, maybe less. I tried to jog at first, but got tired quickly, so I decided to just walk quickly. The only things I could hear were the sound of bugs making noise and the sound of my shoes on the small rocks on the side of the road. This is where it gets really interesting. About half an hour into my walk, I started to hear another walking sound. It was coming from the other side of the road. I stopped walking to listen, and those footsteps stopped too. My small light was of no help. Making sense of it all, I couldn't see clearly. I thought maybe it was just the sounds playing tricks on me, so I started walking again. But then, I heard those footsteps one more time. There were sounds of little branches breaking too. There had to be someone or something on the opposite side. I stopped and crouched down, trying to find a big stone or something to defend myself. But I found nothing. While I was still looking around with my small light, I heard some rustling sounds. Then, I saw someone step out from the trees and start walking my way. At first, I thought it might be some animal, maybe a big one. But as it came closer, I realized it was a man. "Stay there," I said, trying to sound brave. My heart felt like it was going to jump out. I had never been this afraid of another human before. "Why are you here?" he said. His voice was deep, calm, and didn't show any feeling. It felt strange, like he was asking why I was in his backyard. "I'm heading to my job," I answered. I wanted to tell him about my truck breaking down, but I stopped myself. If things got bad, I thought about running back to the truck and locking it. Maybe he didn't even know about my truck. "Where's your job?" he asked. "Just further down the road," I answered. I kept walking, and he walked with me, but he was getting closer and closer. "Hey, why are you coming so close?" I asked, trying to sound more brave than before. I kept an eye on him as I moved sideways, making sure he was always in my sight. There was no way I could defend myself if he tried anything. He was much taller and looked strong. Compared to him, I felt small and weak. I didn't know if he had anything with him that could hurt me, so I thought about just going back to my truck. As I turned back, he looked surprised. I think he wasn't expecting that. I walked faster, heading to where I left the truck. I wasn't going to spend more time with a strange man who just appeared from the woods. Then, after a little while, I heard really loud footsteps. I looked back and saw him running right at me. I could only make out a dark shape, but the loud steps and the big shadow on the ground told me all I needed to know. I saw something shiny in his hand while he was running after me. I thought it might be a knife, which made me run even faster. I pushed my legs to run as quick as they could. My heart felt like it was going to jump out. My head told me to run into the trees and hide. But another part of me was scared he would follow me and find me there. Also, if I made it to my truck, he could just break a window and hurt me. My head was full of thoughts and I didn't know what to do. Just when I thought I had no chance, I saw some lights ahead. When I got closer, I saw it was my truck, and there was another car behind it. I hoped someone was inside the car who could help me. I ran as fast as I could towards the lights, hoping the person in the car wouldn't leave before I got there. I was really tired and my throat felt like sandpaper, but I kept running until I got to the truck. The door of the other car opened and someone stepped out. I was so happy when I saw it was my big brother, Tom. I ran to him and tried to tell him about the man with the knife. Tom always has his gun with him because he used to be in the army. He took out his gun and pointed it where I came from. He shouted for the man to put down the knife or he would shoot. We didn't see the man again, but we heard him running away in the trees. I told Tom everything on our way home. Tom knew I left my phone at home and he knew the truck wasn't working right, so he wanted to bring my phone to me at work. When he found my truck on the side of the road, he waited for me to come back. We told the police everything, but they never found the man. I still don't know who that man was or why he was chasing me, but I'm really thankful Tom was there to help me. If he wasn't, I don't know what would have happened. I was just beginning to see Amy, who's now my soon-to-be wife, when this story took place. In those early days, we were always excited to go out and try something different for our dates. One evening, after having a simple dinner and catching a late movie, we found ourselves with some extra time on our hands. It was around 10 p.m. when the movie finished, so I suggested, "Hey, why don't I show you where I grew up?" She nodded excitedly and we hopped into the car. I drove us to my childhood neighborhood, telling her stories about each corner and shop. After a while, I remembered a trail on a nearby hill that I used to hike when I was younger. It was said that from its peak, you could see the entire city sparkling below. The moon that night was playing hide-and-seek behind some clouds, making everything a little bit spooky and adventurous. We reached the base of the hill and paused for a moment, admiring the view. There was an inviting darkness up ahead, promising a great view once we reached the top. "Shall we?" I asked her. She nodded, her eyes filled with excitement. The initial climb was made easier by old wooden planks, once used as tracks, now serving as makeshift steps. We took our time, soaking in the sounds of the night-chirping crickets, the rustling of leaves, and our soft laughter echoing in the darkness. We paused midway to catch our breath, the steps being a bit steeper than we'd remembered. And that's when it happened. This eerie feeling washed over both of us. We looked at each other, a silent understanding passing between us, when Amy whispered, "Do you hear that?" My ears pricked up, trying to catch the sound she was referring to. I could hear soft noises, like footsteps coming from the bushes. It was clear something or someone was moving closer. Panic began to rise in my chest. "We should leave," I whispered back. But before we could make a move, a low growl echoed from somewhere behind us. Without a second thought, we turned and dashed down the steps, our footsteps loud in the otherwise silent night. Reaching the car, I quickly checked the back seat, having heard tales of dangerous strangers hiding there. Finding it empty, I let out a sigh of relief. But as I switched on the headlights, my relief vanished. In front of us, about 5 figures dressed in dark robes were slowly making their way down the hill. They moved with a purpose, yet there was an eerie calmness to their movements. The sight was reminiscent of those scary movies where cult members roam around in the dark. Pressing the accelerator, I drove us away from that creepy parking spot, not stopping until we were safely out of the small town. Both of us were shaken, unable to fathom what we had just experienced. Those robed figures with their mysterious intent haunted our thoughts. We decided then and there, that hill, with its breathtaking view of the city, was a place we'd never visit again. A long time ago, when I was just 11, something really weird happened to me. I'm now 17 and it still stays with me. Growing up, there was a little wooded area close to my house. It wasn't anything special, just a normal little park that many towns have. But the area around wasn't super safe. People often said there were folks doing drugs and other strange people hanging around. Besides the rumors, there were also stories about the weird things that happened inside that park. But to be honest, I always found forests interesting, even if they were a bit spooky. My best buddy, John, and I were inseparable. Every morning, we'd walk to school together, and most of the time, we'd cut through that little forest, just for the fun of it. John, however, would get sick easily, so there were days I'd have to walk through the forest alone. Things were pretty normal for the longest time, but then, as the cold of winter was fading and spring was starting, something changed. I remember it was spring because the trees were beginning to flower and they looked so pretty. That's when I first saw him. There was this man who seemed a little older, maybe around his 40s. I've never been good at looking people directly in their eyes, so I didn't really get a clear look at his face. But there were some things I couldn't forget. He wore glasses, he walked super fast, and he had this bend in his back that made him look even older than he probably was. The weird part? I began seeing him often when I was in the forest. Not every day, but enough to make me feel uneasy. Sometimes when John was with me, we'd spot him too. But then, I began to notice that he would watch us, especially when we were leaving the forest. There was this one really chilling day when John was sick and couldn't come to school, so I had to walk alone. I took the usual shortcut through the forest, which is next to a road. Sometimes we'd avoid it if there was too much traffic, but that day it seemed quiet. I thought it would be a regular walk like always. After all, nothing bad had ever happened before, but that day, I couldn't have been more wrong about feeling safe. So, after a few minutes of walking, I began hearing steps behind me. At first I just brushed it off, thinking someone else might be enjoying a walk in the woods like me, but something felt off. A weird, uncomfortable feeling started settling in. The steps seemed pretty quick. Now I'm someone who walks fast, but the steps behind me seemed to match mine. Wanting to make sure I wasn't just imagining things, I decided to test the waters. I slowed down, and so did the steps behind me. I then picked up the pace again, and yep, the footsteps got faster too. That's when I knew. Someone was following me, and the only ones around were those passing by on the road nearby. I decided to walk even quicker, trying to put distance between me and whoever was behind, but the faster I went, the faster he seemed to follow. Thankfully, the path through the woods isn't too long. As I came out, feeling a little safer, I could see his shadow. It was a clever way to figure out how close he was without turning around. I decided to cross the road, partly to see if he'd still follow, but also to get a quick glance at him. And there he was, the same man I'd seen before in the woods, the one John and I had noticed. Without giving it another thought, I just sprinted. The big road with its hustle and bustle was nearby. I believed if I could just get there, I'd be safe. Reaching the main road, I took a moment to look back, but he was gone. Maybe he turned around, or maybe he knew another way out of the woods. After that day, I couldn't gather the courage to walk through the woods by myself for a long time, and even when I did, I was super cautious. Thinking back, I realized this man might have been watching and trying to figure out our daily routine. Maybe he had some weird reason, or maybe it was just a sick game to him. I'm just really thankful that nothing worse happened. It scared me big time. If you ever decide to go for a walk in a secluded place, always be aware of your surroundings. It's better to be safe than sorry.